Okay, I'm here with two random interviewees again. Oh, wait a minute. I've seen you two before. Anyway, Task Force and we're going to call it Deep Milwaukee are here. So they can verify everything I'm saying. And I'll have to keep track of it, and we'll get you federal bridge certificate payments later. Okay.
Thank you very much.
So we'll get somebody to get in here and do a PKI, and we'll get you paid. But it will have no footprint. But a lot of folks, want me to comment about the really. I'm still not quite sure if it was satire with Doug and Jason, but if it was satire, it was brilliant because they really brought out all the key points along the way in the investigation that really show what citizen journalism can do, getting involved, and where citizen journalism can actually push forward mainstream media, or at least kind of like other alternative media. The first one they said, the hard drives, that I pried the hard drives was a fun angle. I liked that. That was good. But what it really did is it reminded me that up until that time, the Imran's house, that location in Lorton, the Hawkshead house, was not a part of the indictment. The Sprayer house was. And by finding those drives there, and by having Taggart publicly admit that there was a FBI there, and that was his house, and Imran and Hina were involved, that added Hina to the indictment. That's what expanded the indictment. And that also expanded the counts as well, the charge, because then we added conspiracy. So now we were talking about aspiring in Congress instead of one person with one bank fraud charge for $167,000. Now, if I didn't give Jason enough credit on finding the high-speed router, I want to. I later talked about Rayo Abbas and so forth, and the external little heater that he kept changing the filters every month. So I want to say that I still think, I agree with Jason, Sprayer is the key to the case. So Laurel Everly, another interview with her, Tiffany and Brittany Freitag, other interviews with them, another interview with the other Freitags, low light cameras, GSA, all that's still in play. Jaquia, the whole how she got from Tennessee and Dearborn, Michigan, and being trucked, all that. I agree with Jason 100%, and I think he should do those videos, those interviews. Those are fantastic ideas. I agree Sprayer is the key. So I want to agree to that. Early on in the video, I talked about Andrew McCabe. And I had this working theory that everyone wasn't quite sure of. But then Task Force came to D.C., and she added the fact that, oh, by the way, there was a guy named Andrew McCabe that bought a house just down the street from Hillary Clinton. Now, I had never heard anybody in the mainstream media ever mention that. And that changed the whole perspective. And then a guy named Burgess was bought out, cashed Andy out of that house after Hillary was, running for Senate. That had not been said anywhere along the way. Same thing for the Saipov truckers. I don't know if you remember, but the guy who took the truck and was a truck assassin in Chelsea, that was going to be weird truck assassin in Chelsea. Well, Task Force was the one, if you think about it, that immediately put out all of his trucking companies. I think it was about 3 in the morning, something like that, 3 or 4 in the morning. We put those out there, and they had hundreds of retweets by 6 or 7 a.m. CNN had to cover Bright Auto was in Cleveland. They had to cover Safe Auto in Cincinnati. They had to cover the Rahm Emanuel one that was up on Bussey Road in Mount Prospect, Illinois. They had to cover his trucking company and his partner down in Tampa. When they did the presidential briefing, they had to say, Mr. Trump, these are all the relatives of Mr. Saipov. They couldn't just present one person to Trump, which meant that they had to present all 19 that got EB-5 visas, and we were pushing the concept of EB-5. That's when Trump got the idea of chain migration and lottery. Up until then, it was DACA versus no DACA. After that, it was DACA with no chain migration and no lottery. That changed, I believe that changed public policy by Task Force coming up with that. And the same thing happened with the car ring. Yeah, the same thing happened with the car ring and being able to have a professional come in and drill down on the car theft. I took a lot of criticism about the fact that they couldn't use cars as a transport vehicle for weapons going one way and drugs in the other. Later, 3-part series by Politico came out and found out that's exactly what happened. Derek Maltz with DEA was in New York, and Alpha Jallo was taking cars down to Washington, D.C., and they were going to West Africa as well as onto the Middle East. So that was another big one as well. So those are just a couple of examples. Following all those examples through also yields great results. For instance, Taggart working at Fort Belvoir. Belvoir led to an informant talking about DLA, how DLA had the food and drug situation, how the food and drug tied in with supplying all the different VA hospitals. All this stuff that we are now learning that are causing these DEA licenses at these different veterans facilities. Task Force, again, was the one who showed the Chinese guy who was shot the 3 women who were administrators at the California Veterans Home had a DEA license. That still hasn't been covered, but still that's a huge piece of information. So if I'm a DIA agent or an ABC agent or an XYZ agent, I really don't think it matters. What matters is putting stuff out to the alternative media, and then the alternative media repeats it, and the mainstream media then picks it up. They had to. Just Google Saipov and you'll see all the stuff that Task Force did. So I think that's the key here, is taking it to the logical drill down. Same thing happened with SES. We started with SES, and I want to applaud Doug's work here. He got it down to the core 500. We disagreed on what the core 500 was. We saw that there was 3 levels of SES: FBI, DEA, then came in DIA, and then came in everybody else. We're now down to the individual profiles. Task Force, again, we're down to the individual profiles, looking at all the people, and they have DEA licenses. So consider the full flight of the arrow here on what we're actually doing. We're actually going person to person to person, saying it appears these people are pushed ahead in their careers 10 years, pushed ahead in their compensation 15 years, right? Is that in a trade for something? Is that in a trade? Is that a moral hazard that they trade? They have helicopters coming in to Bolling Air Force Base. They have planes coming in, C-147s coming in to Andrews Air Force Base. Is that what's happening? I don't know. But if you want to bring whistleblowers out, you have to be specific. They can come over to you at the Capitol and say, you're on the right track, just like those 2 police officers did in the Bronx for me, saying, hey, you know, with that Alpha Jula stuff, you're on the right track. So that's what I want to say here, is it doesn't happen overnight. It does take work, but you know you're over the target when you really start getting a lot of accusations and really, I think, quite good satire. If it was satire, excellent job.